Hey, welcome to God's Glory and Men's Real Stories. I'm excited that you would join us today for another great episode. And to all those listening for the first time, hey, thank you for joining us. I want you to know that your story and what you may be going through, they matter here, and you're not alone. So don't worry about what chapter you're in because God's still writing your story. So, hey, look, sit back with a community that cares about you and hopes that you feel God's love as well as see God's glory in men's real stories. So today's special guest is a brother whose story and impact in the mental health field and other fields, and his contributions to so many as like a 3-time author and a founder of the Confess Project of America, which has reached over and growing 2.4 million people. He's currently out on the road on his Beyond the Shop tour that has my brother hit in 61 cities and 32 states and counting, and he's not done. So I'm excited to welcome our brother, Lorenzo P. Lewis, to the episode.
Absolutely.
What's going on, brother?
Doing good. Thanks again, Robert, for having me, and so glad to be a part of this conversation today. Just appreciate you.
No. It's a blessing. I appreciate you taking the time out because I know I don't look at this lightly when people say yes. And I know that a lot of times as I realize that you're currently hitting states, you're hitting cities, you're doing the job, the calling that was placed on your life at one time. And I'm just excited when people will stop for a second and be like, yes, I'd love to be a part of what you're doing. So before we even jump any further, I'm going to let you introduce yourself to people who are like, okay, so who is this guy?
Yeah, absolutely.
And outside of what I've said already. So I've taken a lot of the heat, but go ahead. I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, I love it. No. So I'm, I always like to, mention that, my story, started in, in an interesting place. One of the places that I like to say that steals a lot of men's joy and passion, and that's in a prison. My mother was incarcerated when I was born, so that's where my life started. But that's not where my life has ended up, and not where it's actually going. So I also say that from a place, a source of inspiration, a source of opportunity, a source of vision for people that may be listening. That your story may start one way, but it may end up different. And so that's where my life started, was in a prison, and I navigated through life in some challenging ways, but have been able to navigate to creating and making a difference. Grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas. Was a step away from going in the foster care system because my mother was incarcerated. So when I was born, I went to the social services system in New Jersey, and was in between going into foster care, and my aunt stepping in. She made the longest drive from Arkansas to New Jersey to ensure that I would be around loved ones growing up. And so my life took place in Little Rock, Arkansas. Like a lot of children, I had some good times and some not so good times. But I think in a lot of ways, my life, childhood trauma and journey plays a big role into why I do what I do today. And so, went to public schools, went to, the Boys and Girls Club growing up, had friends, had a very, I would say, traditional and pretty active life, like most young kids will, but it was followed by a lot of emotional havoc and challenges that were faced because of not having my mother and father, not living with my siblings, growing up around family members who went to prison or who was on drugs. And so all of that was the challenging side. But then also there was beautiful side as I grew up in a neighborhood where everybody knew everybody. And, the people next door were like extended mothers and grandmothers who would cook for you and take care of you and look out for you. So in a lot of ways, I had a really cool and necessary and dope life that I grew up in as well. And so as I evaluate both of those, is kind of come here to talk about my story. That's who I am at the core. Before the awards, before the gratification, the media interviews, the relationships, the grants, the building businesses, the being on stages with presidents and celebrities. And so, it's just how my life started, and what I'm able to enjoy today is, where it got better, and where I was able to do more and lean in more and work on myself more until I could enjoy the fruit of the labor that's been done. And also to enjoy, I think the dust of some of the challenges that were endured. Because when you're going through those challenges, you don't really envision that some of these things will come out of it. So I like to say
Sure.
the dust from it, because it's not no one wants to go through challenges to go through a win. Like no, like none of
Sure.
us wake up and say, I want to have a hard day so that the next 2 weeks I have a better day. Like no one wants to do that. Like we want things to be easy and smooth as possible. But that's
Sure.
not how this works. And so so nonetheless, that's who I am and what I bring, and really good, again, glad to be a part of this show, and more than anything, be a message and a help to somebody today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And as you were talking, I was sitting there thinking to myself, like, it's crazy how sometimes how we are born, where we're born, and what that looks like really plays a huge role on where our life takes us and how we may use that as a hurdle. And that
Yeah.
even speaks to like one of the books that you wrote, of recognizing that there are always going to be hurdles. But even in thinking about that, it was crazy because I was thinking about somebody who was born like literally in a barn, and
Oh, wow.
how, like, okay, like, think about the men and women who are born with the story already written to say that guy's going to be a failure right there. That guy, come on, he not that much could have come from his life. He was born in a barn. Not much could have come from this guy's life. He was born where his parents left him on a doorstep. In this case, this guy was born and his mother was in prison. But I recognize that when you let that limitation of where you were born begin to write your story, a lot of times our stories just go downhill from there because we set that as a limitation of like they didn't expect much
Yeah.
out of me. And as I read your story, I recognized that that was a constant call to you, even when it came to like recognizing that there were a lot of pitfalls that you kind of found yourself in to even get here. It wasn't, like you said, it wasn't smooth sailing. What was it like growing up as a kid? And I normally notice it, it's in middle school where people start to like place identities on you and you not fully knowing who you are at that time.
Yeah, so it really started for me when I was, honestly, it was more, I think, around middle school. But even as I back and think about, I started to face a lot of challenges when my dad passed. I was around 10 years old, third grade. And that's when I
Mm,
really started to like act out, started to, really that's when it really all started with identity. I started to shape who I was becoming at that age. And I think a lot of it was behavioral, and it was a sense of, now that I look back on it, it was a sense of self sabotage
sure.
without knowing that that's what it was. So point
Mm,
example is, things were hard. My family was taking things hard. Family members are going through different challenges. All of that comes back to who you are, what impacts your household, and then you manifest that out into the public, into other spaces, and how you show up. And so that actually started to create the identity of who I wanted to become,
right,
because of what I had seen, what I have witnessed, what I
right.
saw from the guy who sold drugs across the street, what I saw
Mhm.
from a family member who was known for getting into fights and hurting people, and like all of those things culminated who I wanted to become.
Right.
And it's actually what I started to manifest out in my identity, and that's how people
Mm,
started to receive me.
for sure. For
And
sure.
it was a mission, because when you're young, you're only doing what you've been shown, right? You're only
For
doing what.
sure. Yeah.
So,
And not everybody gets the opportunity to shape the surrounding of where, like, for instance, I would love my kids to be in a surrounding sometimes where they don't have to see certain things that I grew up in. But
yeah,
is it fair to say that nobody ever asked you how you felt or like what was going through your mind when your father died?
yeah. It wasn't, honestly, back then. I mean, we're talking early '90s.
Okay.
The early '90s, Little Rock, Arkansas. I mean, when you think about, the world has come so far when you talk about mental health and building safe spaces. I mean, back then it was like, hey, you get over there, man. You sit down, you be quiet. I mean, the world was different then. I mean, we was,
Right.
people was. I mean, man, we was, whoopings, and things was
For
just
sure. Oh
so.
yeah. Oh yeah.
They,
Oh
it,
yeah. I'm an 80s baby rolling into the 90s. So I definitely know what you're saying. So okay. So how about this? How did you see other people processing the grief of their lost ones, including yours?
yeah, that's a good point. Recreational marijuana,
Mm,
alcohol, crack cocaine. I mean, all of that. That's how people process. I mean, it was,
right.
even when you think about us going to, African American funerals, right? I'm gonna just say us because I've been to enough funerals in the Black community.
For
But when you go
sure.
to a funeral in the Black community, it's, you know, family members are they getting loaded before they go in the funeral, and even beyond that, they're continuing to drink and smoke because they're trying to suppress a lot of the pain. And it's
All right.
just,
So I'm going to take it even a
and
step further.
not to make this race specific, but
No, no, no.
I'm only speaking from the experiences that I was able to go through.
Sure.
And so, that's how I saw people process. It wasn't, I'm gonna go see a counselor like now, like what we're telling people, like, okay, go talk to a therapist, and these are some modalities and tools. No, it's like, man, I'm about to go smoke a joint. I'm going to get
Sure.
some beer and some gin, and I'm going to the funeral, and I'm gonna cry my eyes out, and then when I leave, I'm gonna do it again.
Sure.
And that's
Okay.
how that was therapy. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that was therapy for a lot of our people, man.
Okay, so I'm going to even take it a step further because you said something that like just hit me, and I was like, "Yo, I can't unsee it now." How many times have you seen like people honestly just get active at funerals
Oh,
because
yeah.
of because they don't know how to process what's going on, how they feel, and so instead of like people talking about it, like you said, they get jacked up a little bit, they drink a little bit, they do whatever they got to do to take the edge off, but they go into a funeral and all of a sudden somebody says something that just like I was not ready to like don't say
Yeah, yeah,
nothing to me, but now we gonna go at it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of that is a lot of it is, the power of rage and how trauma is culminated.
Mm,
And I feel like a lot of times we have lacked communication in so many ways. But when you even think about it, further, just even as far back as slavery, right? When we was, not we was told to not speak up about being beat, and and even um you know how children had to witness mothers being beat, and fathers being and hurt by their slave masters. When you think about the suppression of pain and anger being held inside, it's also
mm,
manifested to how we react now in everyday situations that you just talked
gee,
about. And
yeah,
so, and not even to the point, really lacking that communication of positive communication. And so, the work that we do, in our work is with training, barbers and stylists and all of that. And, frontline workers is that, we're training them on positive communication. Like how do you engage in positively communicating? What are some ways that you can respond? How do you actively listen? How do you validate someone? And so
mm,
these are like very simple tools that we can use in communicating. But like you said, going back to the context, an example of an emotional ride going off, right?
for sure,
um,
yeah,
we haven't really been taught how to communicate. And it even
yeah,
goes as far back as some of the oppression and racial oppression that's happened, far back as we can remember around those different ways of communicating with each other that's been negatively it has negatively impacted us, and so it's also manifested in an outwardly way to disrespecting other people, right?
yeah.
So yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that's a good point. And that it's crazy. I learn something new every time I sit down here because you're right. I never even thought back that far. And that, yeah, you're right. I mean, like there is. I recognize a lot of times we lack the words. And as you guys go out and you guys begin to train frontline workers to not only understand how to approach people, but give them the vocabulary to be able to maybe even put the words to how people are feeling when they can't express it. I know I'm angry. I know I want to roll up on these people. I know I want to, and it's like I can't get before the anger. All I know is it started with anger. I don't know what came before that. So why is it so important? Because some people feel like, well, duh, it's an obvious question, but why is it so important to give the frontline workers in the community that language, to give them those skills, to give them that information to be able to reach others? Why them?
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing is because, as a community, whether you're black, white, women, whatever community you come, whichever sub community, whether you got a disability or you're from the LGBTQ community, whatever that looks like, we've been naturally trained to not go and deal with health systems and medical systems. And not to say that I'm not going to say naturally trained. I'm going to say we've been conditioned that we can, and I mean, this is as humans, most humans, and it's probably when you get into subgroups, black men, white women, it looks different. But as a human race, as a human group, we have been conditioned to really deal with our problems on our own, first and foremost. And then I think when you start to go through subgroups, it gets maybe better or worse, depending on, white, black, young, white, diverse group, disadvantaged. Like it starts to look a lot different. The data looks a lot different, but across the board, I feel like that we've all culminated this level of strength as a human race around this is how we got to show up and taking matters into our own hands. And so with that being the case, because I like to say that we, in so many ways, a lot of us are responsible adults and responsible community members, neighbors and friends and people that love other people. But the reality about it is, who do we deal with the most as people? Well, we don't deal naturally with doctors daily. We don't deal naturally with therapists and nurses daily. We may, if we work in the field, we may have an understanding of, like, I'm talking about the average blue collar working individual who goes to work, take care of families, trying to keep food and shelter and provide for a family. Most of those people are not inclined and connected to academia, health and medical systems, ivory tower groups, and social groups that are empowering people. These are just everyday folks that are trying to make it. So when you talk about the everyday individual, well, who do they talk to? More, they're going to talk to people that look like them or around them. And in most cases, a teacher, a police officer, a coach, a tattoo artist, a barber, a hairstylist, very likely they're going to come in contact with them before they come in contact with a licensed clinical social worker.
For sure.
Like they may so happily know a licensed clinical social worker, but in most cases, if they did, they may not feel comfortable. They may not have the language. They may, depending on this person's walk of life, like where they come from, how they were raised, their religious beliefs. Like there's a lot of components that we have to really examine when we think about this. So they're more likely to talk to someone who's a barber, a stylist, a tattoo artist, or somebody who's just a general person in the community that they may see. And those people are who we got to empower.
Yeah.
And that's why we really been having empowered, African-American barbers and stylists, particularly, in the African-American community around mental health. Because when you think about racism in the health and medical system, and you think about, the criminal, the prisons and the way that, the criminal justice system is designed, they're going to go see a stylist and a barber every week, if not 2 times a month. Or more. And even if they're not seeing them in some kind of way, they're connected with that community that's going to that shop. So whether it's the
Sure.
CD man, the T-shirt man, or somebody who sell cakes that's going in there, getting their hustle on, like or selling CD, like whatever that looks like. They're selling
Acts.
clothes. These people are everyday people that they know, and those people are connected to the ecosystem. So we empower the people that's inside the ecosystem. Then ultimately, we hope that it gets back to the community. That's why we call it Beyond the Shop is the name of the curriculum, because it's beyond the shop, beyond what happens there. Because I don't have hair and I may not go see a barber, but there's likely my son's friend is connected to the CD man or somebody who sells T-shirts or somebody who sells suits and going to the shop. Very likely we know them because they're always out doing their hustle thing and everybody's connected to that person.
Yeah, no,
Right.
for sure.
So,
And honestly, growing up, the barbershop was the place where even if you weren't getting your hair cut, you went to go hang out because you knew everybody was going to be there.
correct.
You knew that on a Saturday, starting in the morning time, you knew you could catch everybody there in your neighborhood. You could catch everybody down there. And whether you was getting a haircut or not, you knew you could get good conversation. You were going to hear about what happened in the neighborhood, on the block, whatever the case may be. So no, that's so true. So why is that so important? Because I recognize that that's you guys are touching and reaching not only barbers, but you're also touching beauticians.
Yeah.
And but I recognize that, and I don't know what the statistic is currently. You may be able to speak to this. Why is it so important to reach men with the way the current suicide rate is?
Yeah. So, right now, and the numbers, they do fluctuate. Suicide, third leading cause of death is between second and third. Sometimes it goes before. Between the ages of, I think it's 18 and 24. Suicide is the third leading cause of death for men, particularly black men, between 18 and 24. It's besides, in some ways, I believe it gets in front of, it's battling between suicide and homicide as far as the ranking of deaths, particularly for that age group. And that's just specific for that age group. Well, when we think about it, there's only 4% of psychiatrists and clinicians that are people of color. And that's clinicians. So that's mental health professionals.
Right.
Then there's 2% of those people that are just psychiatrists that are people of color.
Right.
So when we think about the complexities of race and equity, and then we think about it, we drill down to the numbers and the lack of numbers, and we think about how we need to empower men and uplift men. Well, in a lot of ways, we don't have no one to uplift men and empower men. And if it's only 2% of psychiatrists and 4% of people of color that are mental health professionals, then it's a very low number that are black men or even probably white men. In some ways, depending on how you look, depending on how you're looking at the field, but particularly if we're talking about men, there's a huge, I would guarantee this, and I don't know the numbers, but I would guarantee there's probably more women that are, mostly inclined to be in the field to have licenses and certifications than there are men. And that's probably generally. And then when you talk about black men, it's even less. And so, and we get into race, obviously the numbers are more, a lot more challenging when you take a look at black and white. And so all that to say, we have to think untraditional about how we show up. I used to be at one point in time, I was a deacon in the church, and I remember, as I even think back on it now, how deacons served and showed up and really supported the congregation. I think about even how we were really designed, I think the construct of the medical and health system is one way, but we really, if you look at supportive models, church, barbers, schools, athletics, we have traditionally made it where we have said that you all are not able to do this type of empowerment, and that when in fact we should be able to do that form of empowerment. And I believe now what's happening is you have a lot of organizations, you have a lot of people who are training barbers and trying to train stylists and working with coaches and working with teachers. And well, they've realized that this modern mental health system, healthcare system, is now conducive to a growing world of people and the challenges that we're like when we built this system, way before we can even imagine. I don't think we built it in a way that would think about today's challenges.
Fact.
And it's actually the reason why I know that to be true, because if it wasn't true, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. If it was actually true, because there would be more people that would have been certified to do it, but it's not.
For sure.
And so because so I say all this, I mean, and I'm sure it's a much longer conversation. When you get into the context of the DSMV and who needs to, how to, obviously I do believe that therapists and doctors and psychiatrists need to be able to diagnose people. I want to say that for the record. I do believe that is the case. However, the reality is that there are frontline workers and barbers that should have tools and skills. They should have mental health skills and tools to help people. I believe that should be a standard. And so, and I believe that it's becoming more of a standard when you think about, peer support, people that are peer supporters that work in community health workers. And so there's a growing field of now untraditional health workers, helping to build the health workforce, because of, the growing challenges on people that we're facing every day in our communities and the growing challenges that they're bringing into their lives. It's impacting the workforce. It's impacting the economy. And it's obviously impacting a multitude of different things in regards of violence and public safety. And so that's why, again, going back to your initial request around men, I believe that we have to empower those people around us to have the tools and the skills to help navigate for themselves and for their loved ones. So
for sure, yeah, because I mean, you're right. What happens with those frontline workers? They're not just doing it in their barbershops. They're taking that home. They're taking that home, and they're taking those tools to talk to their own kids, their own husband or wife. And so I see how it benefits a large group, but also I think that with the growing and I'm not going to say it's a trend, but for a lot of people it is a trend. With the growing trend of I want to heal, I want to grow. I'm tired of feeling like this. Everybody else seems to be on a journey. How can where can I find the right people? I feel like as that becomes more of a popular subject where people are starting to realize that I can't stay like this, there are not, like you said, there are not enough people to really facilitate that. I mean, like you got companies like Better Health and everything else, but there's not enough Better Health employees, like you said, that even look like me, that would be able to help.
Yeah.
Which was the biggest cause of why it took so long for me to use different services, because I was looking for somebody that just even stood out to me. Like the guy looks like a guy I would actually talk to.
Yeah.
And I think that's just been a huge pushback. So in all of this, because I recognize that, what we do from looking at it out from the outside, a lot of people say, wow, he's doing a lot to help his community. He's doing a lot to help people. But in that, sometimes we lose ourselves in who we're helping, and we forget that, and this is an important structure that I constantly look at. I can love my brothers and sisters and I can help them as much as I want. But if I'm not starting with myself, then how can I continue to help them? And I've recognized that recently you've been on a journey to begin to pour back into yourself and do different things for yourself, for your health, for your family. So could you kind of like share what that looks like? Because I know that everybody's constantly always like, hey, how can I get to the top like you? How can I achieve to achieve? How can I get what you got? You know, a lot of guys come on your page and they check you out because you got every sneaker or every hat, but it's like, but sometimes they miss those pieces of like, yeah, I can cover up all this stuff with a cool outfit, a cool pair of sneakers, a cool hat. But like, if I'm not fixing what's behind all that, what does it matter?
Yeah, man. Last year it's funny. When I told my wife this, I went through a sense of, probably not last year. So the year before last, so I guess that was 2022. 2020 COVID, the organization grew it went from 0 to 100. 2020 COVID, George Floyd death, and things skyrocketed. The Black Lives Matter movement, corporations, people took a stand, want to do more, and we caught the wave. We were a part of that wave. We were doing the work. We were on the front lines of that work, and the organization grew. We grew. Got a major partnership working with Gillette for about 3 years. Got a lot of capital. Ended up working with the Texas Rangers. We worked with a lot of people, a lot of the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, corporations, you name it. And started to hire people. Started to really bring people along in this journey. And things were just going really well. We were living a dream that I would have once thought about. From 2016 to 2020 was like really hard years of like, I don't know if this is gonna work. Go fast, go slow, go fast. In 2020, it was just go fast. And from 2020, 2021, it was some very prime years, really exciting years. And 2022 went to a state of depression and a burnout, really what it was. And recognized, had gained a lot of weight, a lot of mental weight, a lot of tired, at that point we had started losing funding, it seemed like things were declining and I was really burnt out. So I was like, hey, I need to bring on another leader who can help take this to the next step. And so, found another leader and came in and that didn't work out. And so we're like, okay, maybe it is time to throw the towel. I don't know, maybe this ain't it. And so last year I took a sabbatical and I stepped back and I say a sabbatical. I took a sabbatical from this work. I'm grateful I brought my wife on. We recently got an investment from the Walmart Foundation to do work in juvenile justice. And, believe it or not, bringing my wife on and getting that investment for juvenile justice allowed for me to visit my inner child again.
Sheesh, that's
because and it also allowed for me to find serenity in my partner that I was working with in this work. Because honestly, I felt like I had been in Oprah, Kelly Clarkson, worked with government organizations, worked with, standout political figures and celebrities. But I was burnt out and I was tired and I still felt like we was running low and it was robbing Peter to pay Paul. It wasn't enough sometimes. And it was still, we were doing good to be small and a Black organization, but compared to our counterparts, we were doing very horrible. When you think about the generational wealth gap between the way the capital is distributed between Black and white organizations. So even though we were doing a lot, we still was doing it with a little, which also put us in lack and put us, further beyond than what we could have been. So, I say all that to say that I hit a hard road. I took off about a year, found a leader to help give me some time while I was able to, bring my wife in and work on building a new program. And believe it or not, it allowed me to visit, my health journey and start to really realize that I needed to work on myself. I also went through some really challenging relationships in the business where there were some relationships that didn't work out. There were some near legal things that almost came to light. And it showed me a lot of, envy and a lot of, hatred and jealousy that showed up that I didn't know was around. Last year was a very, very challenging year. But I will tell you, on the other side of that is what exists now is what you see with Beyond the Shop, this tour we're doing, and new opportunities that's come about. And not only that, other projects and other things that are coming to play. So coming back onto the fold after stepping away from this specific line of work, because last year I was pretty much just completely off the scenes and, like I said, kind of doing something else. But it also revealed other things while doing that. And so
Sure.
it's actually one of the first times I've kind of talked about some of these things more in specific. But what it did was it allowed for me to realize that stepping away and being revealed some things, it actually set me up for a greater opportunity, and set up some. I would like to say that this year I think is going to be probably one of the best years, going on year 8 of doing this work, than what we've had. Than we've probably ever had. Actually, this year, the next
Nice.
2 years is slated for probably some of the greatest opportunities that's going to hit. But I believe, being stripped all the way down, going through that darkness, going through those different tribulations and those trials, really I had to go through that to get here. And that kind of goes
Sure.
back to my earlier part. Nobody really wants to plan on going through a hard time to get a good time.
Sure, for
But
sure.
the reality about it, and I know we know in biblical context, man, it's a part of the journey and the life that we live. And so just grateful that God saw fit to take me through some of those, that he was with me as I was going through some of those
Yeah.
challenges, that now
Good.
we're in a position of the next 2 to 3 years and moving forward will probably be some of the best times that we ever could have. I mean, I honestly don't think I can put words to the greatness that's on the way, but the last year felt like it was literally about to, all of it broke. And
Right.
and I was kind of prepared, like, okay, if I got to go back in the workforce, that's what I got to do. I got to figure out, and it wasn't that. It was, I needed to reset. I needed to look at things differently. I needed to look at the business differently. I needed to be innovative. I needed to bring on better people. I needed to let some people go. I needed to, all of that needed to happen. And I didn't, and I don't believe I would have done it if I had have stayed in that same vein without stepping away. And if I had just been comfortable, like, okay, I've been on Oprah, I've been on national TV, I'm good, I can get through this. And it's like,
Right.
no, I got to bring you all the way down, break you down, right? So,
Right.
so,
No,
so,
for
so you can
sure.
be prepared to really give yourself to the next iteration of the journey. And
Yeah.
so, I just say that to encourage, some of the listeners that, those are those moments where it feels like you're really kind of backtracking. Is, in some ways we may be, in some ways it could be the towel being like, hey, it's time to do something different, right? Maybe I need to pivot. But in this situation, it was a pivot, but it was more like, okay, now accelerate fast. So
Right.
now
Right.
accelerate strong and accelerate in a strategic way. And so it really gave us some momentum. Um, it gave us some great momentum. And so I say that in the more short term, 30,000 square feet view. But really grateful, to kind of sit back and see and be realistic about, what does the next step really look like? And honestly, that's my story, is that I think I went through it one time, and right, but 2019 was one of the hardest years of doing this, helping men. I mean, you got to think, we were 2019, 2018, we were building a mental health model that didn't exist for Black men in barbershops, that did not exist. And, we were, just getting in a relationship with Harvard University. We were a Black organization that was needing research and data to prove that this worked, so that we can be respected, so that we can get funded. You can imagine the kind of communications we were getting about, we're going to be used by an academic institution to prove their point or to make their things, to get them millions of dollars, and we get in it, like all of those things that we had
Right.
to endure to get here, but that actually worked out for our good, and it's so, and it was a benefit for both sides of the parties. And so, but then also last year to go through those challenges is really, like, man, are we revisiting what we just, years ago? I was telling my wife that I felt like it was almost like we went through 2019 twice. It went through, early on 2019, car being repo, no money. We was catching buses going to other cities to do this work. We didn't have, riding on a family and friends account, really like struggling to help other people. And we were, like you said, we was really let ourselves go doing this stuff. Me and my partner Darnell, who started doing this work. So I say all that to kind of bring it back to where we was, is that, I had to really learn to center myself, empower myself, and take care of myself in that process, to getting to this point of being able to really receive what's actually taking place and what's going to take place here in the near future. So,
Sure. No, that's good. And I appreciate you explaining that because, like I say, a lot of people don't see what's behind the curtain. They don't see what you do, the work that you do for you to be able to provide for them. And I think one of the strongest words that you said earlier, sabbatical. And a lot of people, they've heard that word, but they don't even understand like what that may look like, whether you use the word sabbatical, Sabbath, whatever, a break. And a lot
yeah,
of people, I remember I used to think that breaks, I would break when I'm dead. But what I didn't realize is that I was moving closer and closer to a grave by not taking the breaks I needed, by taking those mental stops, by taking those sabbaticals to just like slow down and allow what's been happening around me to slow down too, to see, like, to be able to see now, because I think it's in those sabbaticals that it allows us to see a fresh perspective on what's going on around us, maybe see things that we didn't see before. Wait a minute, that shouldn't be happening. Wait a minute, that person shouldn't be doing that. But I
yeah,
think that if we don't ever slow down and we keep moving based on past success, we miss all of those things that will eventually trip us up anyway. And so I appreciate you sharing that because I think that everybody always looks for the success story, but
yeah,
overlooks the success in those valley seasons, as you explained. Um, they overlook the success in that too. Um, so if you were to, like, and I know people ask you this all the time, like, okay, well, like, tell me how, from an entrepreneur standpoint, how I can be successful. And they're always looking for a quick, like, give me some quick, whether it be investments or whatever. What would you say? I always think about it from a monetary standpoint, but I'm also looking at now where I'm at on my journey. What would you say from a spiritual standpoint that people need to consider when it comes to entrepreneurship, uh, growth, just doing whatever visions or whatever dreams God has put on their heart to say, how can I step into that?
yeah. I think, honestly, you know, I like to say that I prayed every day and that I always thought about God and put God first. And I got to be honest, I did and I
Yeah.
didn't. I did and
No,
I didn't. I got to be honest. It was times that I never stopped believing. I never stopped believing the power that was at place. But sometimes you get lost.
for sure.
And I think I want to say that above the record because I don't think a lot of people are honest because
I
they may feel
appreciate that.
ashamed or they may feel like, no, I really did this. And I'm like, no, sometimes I got lost. Sometimes I forgot. Sometimes I didn't think about it. I just didn't.
Yeah,
I was just out
for
there
real.
in the motion. And particularly when I was in survival mode of building a business.
Mm,
When I was in
that's
survival,
good.
which is
Yeah.
it's a hard place to be in. I mean, survival is in the terms of poverty. That's really that's the other terminology you could think of. And when you're in that space, um, you don't know really how things are going to look someday. You don't know how you're going to
Sure.
be feeling someday. You don't know what's the emotion. You don't know how the emotion can be one way this minute and something totally different the next 30 minutes. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why I believe that we truly, no matter if we're in entrepreneurship or whether we're working, I think one of the hardest states for people to be in survival and in poverty is one of the, and which is why we're so committed to doing the work that we do, because we really want to help set people free mentally so that they don't have to be in that space.
For
Because when you're
sure.
in that space, it's just not, it's one of the most unhealthiest spaces you could be in. It's probably worse than having a physical ailment, honestly, because your mind is impacted with survival and everything you do, everything you think is coming out of that vein. It's almost
Facts.
it's not a healthy place to be in.
And,
It's a lot of people that are dealing with that, you know.
and most people, a lot of people, if you told them, if you could recognize that they were in survival, they would tell you, no, I'm
Yeah,
good. This is how it's always looked. This is normal to me. And so it's like trying to convince a person that I can see that you're in a constant state of trying to provide, feed, do this, do that. You haven't even stopped to slow down and realize that you are just surviving life. But you're surviving with the mentality. Like you said, if I can set you free here, then I can begin to unpack all the stuff that you're surviving, allow you to see it the way I see it. But
correct.
but it,
Yeah,
it starts with here. And that's a good point.
yeah. And so just kind of going back, what are some spiritual principles, some modalities that I was able to utilize is, overall was prayer. Something that I really picked up a lot was journaling and writing. Um,
Mm.
I find myself when I feel like my thoughts are racing, or if I'm not calm, if I'm like, right now we're working on some really big projects where it's involving a lot of energy, a lot of mental energy, collaboration, and having to work with other people and figure this out and research and all this stuff. In those moments, prayer, journaling, and really having, I'm gonna tell you, was honestly just having people that are God minded and that higher have a belief in God and that center has really been my hack, honestly, because I probably talk to my mentor sometimes 3 times a day.
That's good.
Gratefully,
Yeah.
gratefully, he has a really good kind of situation where he's able to jump on a call. We also do a lot of some business stuff together as well. But if it wasn't for him, man, I don't think I could have got. I don't think it could. And actually, he's helped me to graduate to finding other mentors and finding other ways of support systems and other people. But at one point, it was just him, and it was
Right.
just my wife, and I didn't really feel comfortable talking to anybody else about the journey because they wouldn't have understood anyway. It was too complex, and you're dealing with
Mm.
having to raise capital, grow a team, travel, be a father. It's too many. It's too many variables going on at one time, and the average individual just don't understand it. They
I
just
get
don't.
it.
They can't
Yeah.
compute the understanding, especially if they're not on that side of it. And so, I would say, prayer, um, finding the power in writing, and self actualization, finding the power in being quiet. Therapy was really big for me. I hadn't accessed therapy in a while simply because I've been able to use therapeutic tools, and that's what therapy is for.
Mhm.
It is for using the tools. I mean,
Right.
you shouldn't have to go to therapy forever, unless you have a chronic, mental health issue, and then yes, you do need to go. But if you are just dealing with, some life and seasonal challenges, you should get the tools and you should use the tools post therapy on through your life. And if you need to go back to therapy, you go back or you find other modalities to adapt. And then you go back out and you continue to live your life in the way that you need to live it. And so I used therapy consistently for about 2 or 3 years there that I didn't talk about in the initial. And that really helped a lot. So
Sure.
it was a combination of support, therapy, um, you know, writing, and really figuring out who I was. Honestly, as we know, in success, you start to run into imposter syndrome, and run into not feeling worthy, and I don't really see myself as this person as what other people see, and then you start doubting yourself,
Facts.
and now you start to deteriorate on the dream and the dream. So all of that is it took a while to get to a place to say, I know my worth. I've worked to get here, and this is who I am and what I do. And I'm
Facts.
also imperfect while doing this, and accepting all of that in totality has allowed for me to be an entrepreneur at a spiritual level. Now, on the financial side, as we know, we can talk numbers, and that's complex. That's more complex. It's a lot of strategy. Each field is different. So,
Sure.
but on a spiritual level, as an entrepreneur, those are the principles that I use that really help sustain me. Another thing that I really did is I engaged in a lot of professional and personal development. So I did a lot of my professional development. I'm in quite a few different fellowships. I'm in some residency programs. Most of those programs offer coaching, chaplaincy. They offer like a lot of different programs to help you personally. I also have paid a personal coach and a therapist. So I've had to put a lot of personal income.
Right.
I've utilized other resources to use. I mean, it's a lot of it is not. I didn't just go to church on Sunday and that was it. Like
Right.
I did.
Right.
Like it was
Nah. Yeah.
a lot of internal engine work that was like. Oh, I mean, my wife will tell you I've spent thousands and thousands of dollars on coaches and different. It's just been a lot. It's just a lot. It's a lot. So.
But would you say that was like, and I know people always talk about investing, and however that looks, whether you out flipping money still or you're invested in stocks. But I think that people overlook the investment in yourself, and that's
Yeah.
what you're talking about. And the
Yeah.
investment in yourself pays back better dividends than any investment, because I
Yeah.
mean, think about it. Money can come and go, but what you learn from those places, which is why I always hear those people say, like, I'm not cheap, because what you're going to get out of me, what you're going to get out of this, the investment you're making in yourself now is going to continue to pay you. It's going to continue to build you. It's going to continue to grow you. You you can't just get that from having a lot of money in the bank.
Yeah, you
So
can.
I really think that that's another area that a lot of people sometimes fall short in, and that, yeah, but I mean, I can't get that back. But it's like, yeah, but think about what you're going to get back in return of what you're putting in. So it's all a self-investment. Everything you said, from the journaling to the coaching to the mentor, that was huge. A lot of people, I
Yeah.
hope they got that. I hope they're writing that down. Mentors, therapists, these are all tools that as men, as women, we need to look into. We need to almost write it down and say, okay, what have I done in that area? Because those are all good call outs, and all of
Yeah.
them are spiritual.
Yep. Yeah, they are. They are definitely. And that's why
Yeah.
I really like the mission of the show here. I feel like it's really. I like how we tactically have to think about. There's a bigger investment as an entrepreneur spiritually than it is financially. And if you do not take that part serious, I'm not positive you'll make it to where you're trying to go. So,
Mm.
and I just think that's just the
Good
reality. And
call.
there was times during the valleys. There was times even when I was up, even at a practical, technical level, decisions sometimes that I had to, because I've done a lot of things that failed, outright failed. It didn't work. Starting other businesses didn't work. Things that we just ran into that we didn't know about. But when I go back and think about the time that I was emotionally intact, emotionally connected, spiritually connected, getting proper rest, working out physically, like all of those things, on a good nutritional regimen, all of those things working together was really when I can think about, not necessarily that I made more money or that we had more upsize and opportunity or growth, but that I was actually at peace. And then sometimes that other part too.
It was a
And so,
byproduct of it.
yeah, so I think it's just there's an ingredient of all of it that has to, I think really has to work together, because sometimes it won't be in terms of money. It just won't.
Sure.
It may be that you got better peace, and having better peace, you can be a better entrepreneur because you're clear.
Sure.
You're not your mind,
Sure.
your thoughts are not racing. You're not overthinking yourself. You're not doubting yourself. Like, so having peace can help you make a lot of money. I mean, it just can. It's proven
Sure.
that. And having a good mental health, a quality mental health, will allow you to have good relationships. Will allow you to not do self-sabotage. I mean, so having
Oh,
all of that
good.
allows you to be the engine that people want to be. Like, oh, I want to operate like these tycoons. It's like, well, hey, you got to have a good mental health. You got to have a good spiritual. You got to be connected, because imagine how much is coming at you every day. And if you're not at peace and you don't have a good quality mental health, a lot of the moves you're going to make will fail. It's not going to work
Sure.
because you're not clear. You're not being clear in how you're going to show up in the marketplace. So
No, that's so good. That's true. That's so true, man. Man, that's good. And I can't even really add to that because I mean you hit everything. Honestly, you're right. They're when you do those things, like you said, it just creates space for you to show up better in every area, and then go back and assess some of the areas that you're not showing up in, and say, you know what, my mental's good now, my spiritual's good. What about my physical? What about
yep,
the relationships I'm wanting to build now that I am out of this space of like keeping everybody away,
yep,
isolating, which is the worst thing we could do sometimes. But
yep.
just realizing that when our mental's good, man, we show up better in every area. And that's so good. And I appreciate you sharing that message with us today, and just kind of like just talking about just where it's gotten you, what it's done in your journeys. And I'm continuing to root for you, not only just professionally, but also in all the other areas that you're
Yeah, for
continuing to
sure.
tackle, because I recognize that it's those areas that are going to bring forth those great seasons in your
Yep, yep, yep.
in your career, and what you guys are doing with the different projects, with the forget my mind right now, the out of the shop, or
Yep, beyond the shop. Yep, yep, yep,
beyond the shop. Yes,
yep,
after get
yep,
out of the
yep,
shop,
yep.
beyond the shop. Yes, just going beyond what you guys have been doing, and going beyond and beyond into the next area of wherever God's taking you and your wife and
Yep.
your company and all. So, man, I'm really proud of you, man. I appreciate you
Thank
joining
you. I
me today.
receive
I
it.
appreciate the
Absolutely. I appreciate that.
conversation. Was there anything you wanted to leave the listeners with today outside of? I would definitely want you to share a little bit of how they can find you, and where they can look you up at, and what they can see what you're continuing to do.
Yeah, definitely. No, so we'd love to just engage the listeners that to follow our work online. I think that's the best way to ask for support, is just to stay locked in with Lorenzo P. Lewis. And if you want to learn more about the work that we do, is at the Confess Project of America. And just it'll give you the full, I think, the most clear and succinct rundown of what we do and our track record. Coming to a community near you. We're on a 23-city tour right now. We're traveling every coast of the United States, and some rural and large size cities as well. But really, with a focus on taking this training into communities, some newer communities that we have never visited, and some existing communities to continue to build on the capacity we've started. And so I think just a message for today is, and for this interview is, to stay in the race and continue to jump and go over life hurdles. It was not only was a book that I wrote, but it's a general message that I like to just leave with people, because I feel like life is truly a race, and that there's parts of that race where you think about in the track race where you have to do the cool down and really running those laps, and that's how life looks. Running the shoulders of the race and the curves, and doing the straights, and sometimes there may be injuries, or there may be different variations in a track race in meters where the crowd is loud and not as loud, and that's how life looks. Sometimes it's noisy, sometimes it's not as noisy.
Facts.
Some
Cramps.
people are rooting once you're towards the end, and they're not rooting once you're like that's really how life really looks. And so
So true.
we just got to continue to stay in that race, and sometimes it may be favorable and it may not be as favorable, but I feel like if we can stay committed, we'll find the destiny that we're trying to reach. So
No, it's so good. That's so good. I can't unsee that now. I'm sitting here like, yeah, he's right. Like the
Yeah,
cramps, all kind of things that come at you. Those hurdles come at you fast. You don't even see them
yeah,
coming, but that's so
yeah,
good.
yeah,
That's so
yeah.
good. Well, thank brother. I appreciate you, Lorenzo, for sharing with me today, for taking the time out of your busy schedule just to sit down with me. Um, I thank all my listeners for joining
Sure.
us for this conversation. Hopefully, you truly got something out of this. Hopefully, you got some notes. There was a lot of gems there dropped. There was a lot that was shared there, and hopefully, it can continue to propel whatever you may be doing, whatever that life may be looking like right now, whatever you may be feeling right now. Know that it starts with everything that we just kind of unpacked in this whole episode. So we thank you guys for listening. Thank you again, brother. And we'll talk to you guys again on the next episode. Y'all be blessed.
We appreciate you listening today and hope that if you enjoyed this episode, you'll like and subscribe and also listen to past episodes. We hope to bring you great future content as well. Please comment your thoughts on this episode as well as leave any prayer requests below so that this community can pray alongside you. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook at God's Glory and Men's Real Stories.
Brothers, we understand how the thoughts of even facing your own past and current story and the pain and hurt that come along with this is no easy task. But you're not alone, as you hear in these episodes. Nor has God forgotten you or left your side, as He's in it with you, fighting alongside you through the storms of life. He loves and has already forgiven you, no matter what you have done, and He wants a relationship with you. Your healing, freedom, and growth are important to God, and to us as well. Maybe you're considering giving up, or need someone to talk to. Here are a few resources that already exist that we hope can shine a light into that dark place you're in. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number is 1-800-273-8255. If you need support but are not in crisis, consider reaching out to a warm line with individuals who would love to talk with you. Speaking to someone on these calls is typically free and confidential and run by people who understand what it's like to struggle in life. Find a local number by going to warmline.org.